The canyon walls seemed to close in on every side, towering dark silhouettes etched against a moonless night sky. The narrow strip of cracked asphalt winding through the gorge was the only way forward, and the only chance for survival. To anyone else, it was just a forgotten road carved into the desert, but to Captain Elena Ramirez and Sergeant Maya Kovac, it was salvation, or a grave. Their convoy stretched for nearly a mile behind them. Trucks filled with civilians, wounded soldiers, and critical supplies rumbled along, engines straining under the weight of hope. Every life in that line of steel depended on two women who had no backup, no air cover, and only their wits against an enemy with eyes in the sky. "Drones are circling again," Maya whispered into her throat mic, her voice steady but carrying the sharp edge of exhaustion. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, muscles burning, but her blue eyes never lost their watchfulness as they scanned the ridgelines. Elena crouched by the canyon wall, adjusting the lens of her thermal scope. A faint red blot appeared, a hovering drone, camouflaged by the night, its camera lens sweeping for targets. She exhaled slowly, raising her suppressed rifle. One squeeze of the trigger, and the drone sparked like a falling star before crashing into the rocks below. "One down," Elena said. "But if there's one, there are 10 more. They're hunting us." The radio crackled. "Command to convoy lead. You've got 6 minutes before enemy interceptors lock your position. You must clear the canyon." 6 minutes. It was impossible. The road twisted like a snake, narrow and treacherous. Any mistake would bottleneck the convoy and trap everyone. Elena glanced at Maya. No words were needed. They'd worked together for years, from urban raids to mountain rescues. Their trust was carved from fire. "Then we'll make them believe the road is already blocked," Elena muttered, pulling a flare from her belt. Maya nodded instantly, already grabbing a signal jammer. The plan was insane. They weren't just outrunning the enemy. They were outsmarting them. As the first echoes of drone rotors filled the canyon, the two women sprinted forward, their boots pounding the asphalt. Behind them, dozens of lives held their breath in silence, watching their protectors vanish into the night's throat. And then, the first explosion lit up the sky. The canyon turned into a war zone in an instant. A swarm of drones descended like vultures, their sleek bodies humming, red lights blinking as they locked onto heat signatures below. The first missile streaked down, striking a rock ledge, showering the road in shards of stone and fire. The convoy screeched to a halt, headlights flicking wildly, engines roaring in panic. "Keep them moving," Elena shouted over the radio, her voice iron. "If you stop, you're dead." But even as she barked orders, she knew panic could unravel everything. The drivers weren't soldiers, they were medics, farmers, engineers, people pulled from shattered towns. Fear would paralyze them faster than bullets. Maya slammed the jammer into the ground, its dish antenna spinning up with a shrill hum. Signal interference up, 30 seconds max before they burned through it. The air was alive with fire and dust. The convoy roared forward, trucks jolting over cracks in the narrow asphalt. But the enemy pressed harder. The distant thrum of approaching armored vehicles grew louder, echoing through the canyon like a drumbeat of doom. Elena didn't waste a second. She slung her rifle, clipped a climbing line to her harness, and looked straight at Maya. No words were needed. They had lived through too much together. Maya only gave a firm nod, the kind of nod that said, "I'll cover you no matter what it takes. Convoy, keep moving." Elena barked into her mic. "You've got 2 minutes to clear the canyon before this turns into a kill box. We're buying you that time." With that, she ran toward the sheer wall of rock. The cliff face was jagged, fractured by centuries of erosion, but it was nearly vertical. Each handhold crumbled beneath her gloves as she climbed, boots scraping against loose stone. Bullets cracked overhead. Drones buzzed, circling like angry hornets. The air tasted of gunpowder and iron. Below her, Maya became a whirlwind of gunfire. She crouched low behind a burning wreck, her rifle barking in controlled bursts. Every drone that dipped low enough to strike exploded in a shower of sparks, her accuracy as sharp as a scalpel. But the enemy was relentless. A missile streaked toward the convoy's middle truck, a supply rig hauling medicine and food. Maya sprinted forward, barely thinking. She grabbed the shoulder of a panicked private, yanking him clear of the blast radius just as the missile slammed into the road, flipping the truck sideways. The canyon shook. Rocks tumbled like thunder. Smoke blanketed the air. Maya staggered to her feet, ears ringing, but her hands were already steadying her rifle again. "Elena, how high?" she called over comms, coughing through the haze. "Almost there," Elena panted, her voice rough with effort. She was 20 meters up now, clinging to the wall like a shadow. Her arms burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't slow. Each second felt stolen from fate. Halfway up, a drone spotted her. It swooped in, its red eye blinking as it locked onto her heat signature. Elena froze, pinned to the wall, with no cover. Her pulse spiked. Crack. A single shot echoed. The drone burst apart midair, fragments raining down. Elena looked down. Maya stood in the open, her rifle smoking, her stance unshakable despite bullets snapping around her. "I told you," Maya said through clenched teeth. "I've got you." Elena smiled grimly, then forced herself upward again. Finally, she reached the fractured seam in the rock face, a spiderweb of cracks stretching across the canyon wall. She unhooked her satchel, pulling out the last of their C4 charges. With trembling hands, she planted the explosives, pressing them into the fault lines. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Below, Maya reloaded, teeth gritted. The convoy was nearly through the canyon's far mouth, but the last trucks, the ambulances and rear guard, still lagged behind. The enemy armor was getting closer. The ground trembled with the growl of tank treads. "Elena, you've got 60 seconds, Maya warned. Then we're out of time." Elena set the final charge, secured the detonator, and whispered a quiet prayer. Then she began the climb down. Every movement was agony. Her arms screamed as she descended, her boots skidding on loose rock. Bullets chewed the cliff near her, sending sparks and shards into her face. She ignored the pain, focused only on reaching the ground. Maya was waiting, rifle blazing, eyes scanning every angle. She shouted over the chaos, "You drop, I'll catch you." Elena's grip slipped, and for one terrible second she dangled over the void. With a final push, she released, falling the last 5 meters. She hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Her body screamed in protest, but she forced herself to her knees. "You okay?" Maya shouted, grabbing her arm. Elena nodded, gasping for breath. "I've got the detonator. We end this now." The roar of engines thundered through the canyon. Enemy tanks appeared at the far mouth, their searchlights piercing the smoke. Dozens of armored vehicles surged forward, their guns already turning toward the convoy. Maya and Elena stood in the road, side by side, the canyon wall looming behind them. The convoy's final truck cleared the far bend, disappearing into safety. Now it was only the two of them. "Elena," Maya said quietly, eyes fixed on the advancing armor. "If this doesn't work." "It'll work," Elena cut in. Her voice was firm, steady, the voice of someone who had made peace with death but refused to bow to it. The first tank fired. The shell screamed past them, slamming into the canyon wall. The ground shook violently. Rocks tumbled. Elena raised the detonator. "For every life in that convoy," she whispered. Then louder, "Fire in the hole." She pressed the trigger. The canyon erupted. The explosives tore through the weakened rock face with a deafening crack. The cliff groaned like a dying beast, then collapsed in a tidal wave of stone and dust. Massive boulders thundered down, slamming into the road, crushing tanks, burying armored vehicles in an avalanche of earth. Enemy fire cut off mid-roar as steel was flattened under tons of rock. Maya threw herself over Elena, shielding her as the shockwave rolled through. Dust choked the air, blotting out the moonlight. For a moment, the world vanished in chaos. Then silence. When the dust began to settle, Elena opened her eyes. The canyon behind them was sealed, an impenetrable wall of rubble and fire. The enemy was buried, their pursuit ended. Maya coughed, pulling herself upright. "You did it," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. Elena shook her head. "We did it." But their victory wasn't without cost. Their comms crackled with static, damaged by the blast. Their path back was cut off. They were stranded on the wrong side of the collapse, deep in enemy territory, with no way to rejoin the convoy. The mission wasn't over, it had only changed. "Elena," Maya said, reloading her last magazine. "Looks like it's just us now." Elena glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at her lips despite the exhaustion, the pain, the smoke still stinging her lungs. "Then let's make it count." The two women turned toward the desert night, where new threats waited beyond the rubble. Their convoy was safe, hundreds of lives saved. But now, their survival was a different story, and the enemy would not stop hunting them. The desert at night was both ally and enemy. Shadows stretched long and black under the thin crescent moon, masking movement, but hiding threats just as easily. Elena and Maya moved quickly, their boots crunching lightly over gravel, rifles tight in their arms. Every breath burned from the dust, still clinging to their lungs. Behind them, the rubble-choked canyon stood like a tombstone marking where they had turned the tide. Ahead, only uncertainty. "Radios fried," Elena muttered, shaking the useless device at her belt. "No comms. No GPS. We're ghosts out here." Maya checked her compass, its needle trembling in the faint moonlight. Convoy was headed northeast. Closest forward operating base is 20 clicks that way. She pointed toward a black horizon, a jagged silhouette of low hills. "If we can reach it before dawn, maybe we get a chance." Elena gave a sharp nod, but both knew what was unspoken. 20 kilometers on foot through hostile ground, with drones in the air and armored patrols crawling like spiders, was a gamble at best. The desert was far from silent. The distant rumble of engines carried on the wind, punctuated by the metallic whine of drones overhead. The enemy hadn't given up, they were regrouping. The collapse had stopped the tanks, but infantry would spill out around the other side of the canyon soon enough. "They'll sweep the desert for survivors," Maya said, adjusting her rifle strap. "And they'll know we're still out here." "Then we move faster," Elena replied, eyes scanning the horizon. They trudged onward, keeping low, zigzagging across gullies and dry riverbeds. The cold of night crept into their bones, a cruel contrast to the heat they'd endured during the day. Every muscle ached. Every step carried the weight of exhaustion. But neither stopped. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher, then dipped low again, shadows shifting like restless spirits. At one point, they spotted lights on the horizon, enemy search teams, their beams slicing through the dark like blades. Maya pressed Elena flat against the rocks, her heartbeat thundering. 2 trucks. "Patrol pattern," Maya whispered. Elena peered through her scope. 12 men, maybe more. Drones circling overhead. She exhaled slowly. "Too many. We stay down." The patrol rolled past, engines growling, the men inside laughing like jackals. Elena and Maya didn't move, their bodies pressed so tight to the earth that every grain of sand seemed etched into their skin. Only when the sound faded did they rise, their nerves frayed, but their determination unbroken. By the time the eastern horizon began to pale with the first hint of dawn, they had covered nearly 12 kilometers. Their legs felt like lead, their lips cracked, their throats dry. Supplies were scarce, 2 canteens of water between them, a handful of ration bars, and just 4 full magazines. "We can't make it by daylight," Elena finally admitted, her voice ragged. Maya scanned the landscape. "We'll need shelter. Somewhere to hide until nightfall." As if fate answered, they spotted it, a half-collapsed adobe structure in a shallow ravine, long abandoned. Its roof caved in, but its walls still standing. The remnants of a village, perhaps, lost to sand and time. They slipped inside, weapons ready. It smelled of dust and old stone, the silence, so heavy it seemed sacred. They settled against the wall, backs pressed to the cool clay. For a moment, neither spoke. Their breaths echoed softly in the hollow chamber. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "You ever think we wouldn't make it this far?" Elena gave a dry laugh. "Every minute. But somehow we keep walking." Maya turned her head, studying her partner in the dim light. Elena's face was streaked with dirt and sweat, her eyes hollowed by exhaustion, but still blazing with fire. "You climbed that wall like it was nothing," Maya said quietly. "If it weren't for you, that convoy would be ash right now." Elena shook her head. "We did it. Together. You covered me when I was exposed. You saved me a dozen times over." Maya gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Instead, she looked down at her rifle, running her thumb over the worn grip. "We're alive now, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot." And she was right. Even as the sun began to crest the horizon, the faint hum of engines drifted closer, carried on the wind. The enemy was still hunting. The first rays of dawn spilled across the desert, painting the sand gold and crimson. Elena and Maya huddled low inside the ruin, their eyes narrowed against the light. The ravine had seemed safe, but now the sound of engines drew nearer, unmistakable. "Patrol," Elena hissed, crawling to the shattered window. She peered through the cracks in the wall. Dust plumes rose in the distance, 3 armored trucks rolling slowly, methodically, their searchlights sweeping the ground. Maya joined her, jaw tightening. "They're combing the ravine. They'll find us." Elena's mind raced. They couldn't outrun vehicles in the open desert, not in daylight. They couldn't face overwhelming numbers head-on either. They needed an edge, a trap. Her gaze flicked around the ruin. Broken beams, crumbled walls. The roof half-collapsed. She saw it then, an opportunity. "Help me with this," she said quickly, dragging a heavy wooden beam into position. Together they shifted debris, piling it above the entrance in a precarious balance. The slightest force would bring it crashing down. "Improvised deadfall?" Maya asked, sweat dripping from her brow. "Exactly. We wait for them to breach, then drop the hammer. It'll buy us time to slip out the back." It wasn't much, but it was something. Moments later, the patrol arrived. The trucks rumbled to a halt at the mouth of the ravine, tires grinding on stone. Boots hit the ground. The sharp clatter of rifles carried on the still morning air. Maya's grip tightened on her weapon. She glanced at Elena, who raised a hand in calm, steadying silence. They crouched low, breaths shallow, listening as footsteps approached. The first soldier entered the ruin cautiously, rifle raised. Dust shifted with his every step. Another followed, then another. Shadows flickered across the broken walls. "Now," Elena mouthed. She shoved the support beam. The ceiling groaned, then collapsed in a roar of stone and timber. Dust exploded outward as the men inside were buried under tons of rubble. Their shouts were cut short, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground. "Move," Elena hissed. They bolted through the rear opening, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Behind them, chaos erupted as the remaining patrol scrambled, shouting orders in confusion. But they didn't make it far before a shot rang out. Maya staggered. Elena caught her before she hit the ground, dragging her into cover behind a jagged outcrop. Blood seeped through Maya's sleeve, staining her fatigues crimson. "Bullet grazed me," Maya hissed through clenched teeth. "Not deep." Elena's hands moved fast, tearing a strip of cloth and binding the wound. "You'll live," she said, her voice a fierce whisper. "You have to." The enemy regrouped quickly. The trucks were circling, engines roaring, dust clouds rising like storms. Drones buzzed overhead, their red eyes scanning the ground. Trapped in a ravine, outnumbered, low on ammo, and with one partner wounded, it seemed impossible. But for Elena and Maya, impossible had never been an option. Elena locked eyes with Maya. "We fight smart. Hit and run. Bleed them until they break." Maya forced a grin through the pain. "One last dance." Elena chambered around, her face grim but determined. "Until the music stops." And with that, the two women prepared to turn the ravine into a battlefield. The ravine trembled with the echo of engines and shouts. Dust hung in the morning air like a curtain, hazy and choking. Elena crouched behind the outcrop, rifle pressed tight to her shoulder, her ears tuned to every footstep, every scrape of boots on stone. Beside her, Maya fought to steady her breathing, her arm bound tightly with cloth already darkened with blood. "3 squads," Elena whispered, eyes narrowing as shadows moved across the ridge. "At least a dozen, maybe 15. Maya's lips curled into a grim smile. Odds could be worse. Elena shot her a look, half disbelief, half admiration. "You're insane." "And you're still here with me," Maya replied. The sound of boots drew closer. Orders barked in a foreign tongue bounced off the canyon walls. A drone hummed overhead, its lens glinting like a cold eye. Elena knew they were boxed in. The patrols had fanned out, cutting off escape. "We can't let them surround us," Elena muttered. "We'll bleed them here. Ambush, move, ambush again." Maya nodded, pulling her rifle close despite the pain. Her face was pale, sweat beading at her temples. But her eyes burned with the same fire Elena had seen the night she volunteered for the mission. The first squad entered the ravine cautiously, weapons raised, their movements sharp and disciplined. Elena waited until they passed the collapsed ruin before giving Maya a nod. 2 shots cracked almost in unison. The lead soldier fell, then the one behind him. Chaos erupted. Shouts filled the air as the enemy scrambled for cover. Bullets tore through the rocks, chips of stone exploding around the women. "Shift left." Elena barked. They sprinted across the ravine, diving behind a new outcrop as gunfire stitched the air where they had been. Elena squeezed off 3 more rounds, dropping another soldier. Maya's rifle barked, her hands steady despite the blood dripping down her sleeve. But for every man they took down, 2 more pressed in. The trucks roared at the mouth of the ravine, machine guns rattling, forcing them to keep low. The women's magazines emptied fast. Elena slapped in her last full clip, jaw tight. Maya checked hers, just 5 rounds left. "We're running dry," Maya said flatly. Elena's gaze flicked upward. The drones circled tighter, their hum growing louder, like vultures. And then she saw it, an exposed fuel drum strapped to the back of one of the trucks. "Maya," Elena said, voice low but fierce. "That drum. If we light it, chain reaction takes the trucks with it." Maya followed her gaze, lips parting in understanding. "But it's suicide to get close enough." Elena's jaw set. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way out. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Words weren't needed. They'd been partners too long. Finally, Maya gave a weak chuckle. "Figures. Last mission together, and you picked the insane plan." "Wouldn't be us otherwise," Elena said, a rare smile flickering. They moved as one. Elena lay down, suppressing fire, bullets sparking against armored plating. Maya, despite the blood soaking her sleeve, pulled a grenade from her vest. She yanked the pin with her teeth, her eyes locked on the fuel drum. "On 3. Elena shouted. 1. Gunfire roared around them, dust spraying into their faces. 2. Maya braced her arm, every muscle trembling with pain and determination. 3. She hurled the grenade with all her strength. It arced through the air, spinning in slow motion. For a heartbeat, the entire battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Then it struck the fuel drum. The explosion was deafening. Fire ripped across the trucks in a chain reaction, engulfing the vehicles in a wall of flames. The blast threw soldiers to the ground, their shouts drowned by the roar of destruction. Drones spiraled wildly, their sensors blinded by smoke. Elena dragged Maya back into cover, shielding her from the shockwave. The heat licked at their skin, the air thick with smoke and ash. When the fireball faded, silence fell, broken only by the crackle of flames and the groans of wounded men. The enemy patrol was in chaos, scattered, broken. But Elena knew it wasn't over. Reinforcements would come. She looked at Maya. Her partner's face was pale, her breathing shallow. Blood still seeped from her wound, slower now, but steady. "We move," Elena said firmly. "Now." Maya tried to stand, swayed, then steadied herself with a grimace. "Lead the way, partner." And so they staggered out of the ravine, battered but alive, the fire behind them painting the desert sky red. The sun blazed high by the time Elena and Maya crested the ridge overlooking the desert plain. Their bodies ached every step of battle, but the sight before them stopped them cold. Far in the distance, winding like a steel serpent through the sand, was the convoy. Dozens of vehicles, scarred and battered, but still rolling. Somehow, impossibly, it had survived. Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. They made it. Maya smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Because we bought them time." But the moment of relief was short-lived. Black smoke still rose on the horizon behind them. Reinforcements would be hunting soon. If they didn't reach the convoy quickly, they would be cut off again. Elena helped Maya down the slope, half carrying her when her legs buckled. Step by step, they trudged through the desert heat, their canteens long empty, their strength nearly spent. By midday, the convoy had slowed, wary of ambushes. Scouts fanned out ahead, rifles scanning the ridges. When Elena raised her rifle and fired a single shot into the sky, one of the scouts swung his scope toward her. Recognition spread like wildfire. "Friendly. Friendly on the ridge," voices shouted. Within minutes, soldiers rushed forward, their uniforms dusty, their faces weary, but alive. They reached Elena and Maya just as her knees gave out. Hands grabbed her, steadying her, voices filling the air. You stopped them?" one soldier asked in disbelief. Elena forced a tired grin. "Bought you enough time to keep moving. That's what matters." Maya leaned against her, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Convoys safe, missions done." Medics swarmed them, checking Maya's wound, forcing water into their hands. Elena sat in the sand, her body trembling with exhaustion, and finally allowed herself to breathe. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself believe they would survive. Later that night, as the convoy camped under the stars, the two women lay side by side on stretchers, bandaged and alive. The hum of engines was gone, replaced by the quiet murmur of soldiers grateful to still draw breath. "You know," Maya said softly, her voice rough, "they'll probably never know half of what we did back there." Elena turned her head, studying her partner's tired face. "Doesn't matter. We know. That's enough." Maya's lips curved into a weak smile. "Still wouldn't mind a medal or two." Elena chuckled, the sound low and warm. Greedy even on death's doorstep. They both felt quiet, staring up at the endless sky. The stars shimmered, vast and eternal, indifferent to the blood spilled below. But to Elena and Maya, those stars felt like witnesses, silent guardians of their struggle, their sacrifice, their survival. "Get some rest," Elena whispered. "We've earned it." Maya's eyes fluttered closed, her breathing evening out. Elena stayed awake a while longer, watching the flames of the campfire flicker, listening to the heartbeat of the convoy, the lives they had saved. And for the first time in years, she felt at peace. Because in the darkest night, when death closed in, two partners had refused to surrender. And because of that, hundreds lived to see another dawn.